Yeah, well, what is the mission of the church? Well, I think some people would tell you that the mission of the church is to have good meetings. They put in an enormous amount of time, effort, finances, resources into having meetings that are pleasing, into having meetings that work for people. But I think Jesus came to give us a new way of life, not just a new way of meeting. Some people would tell you that the mission of the church is to have a good worship service. And I think it's strange to put the words worship and service in the same sentence. It kind of means that a few people are servicing many. A few people are creating an atmosphere or an emotional experience for many. And in essence, to worship is not to be served. To serve is to worship. It says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. And in this statement, we see Jesus including and encompassing all of these things. First of all, he says, go. He speaks about the mission. He sends us. I think mission precedes church. We often see mission as a side thing. We see church as the main thing. And the church has a mission. But the truth is that the mission has a church. The truth is that no church would exist if it weren't for mission. Mission is the deep thing that runs right through. And so we need to see ourselves on mission. And while we're on mission, we happen to start church and we happen to do church. When Jesus calls his disciples, he calls the 12 and he says, come, I want to teach you how to be fishers of men. He calls them not to do or be church, but to a mission. He calls them to a greater purpose. And then Jesus says, make disciples, not converts. He says, make disciples. So I think the church is largely focused on an event. We focus so much on the one event, conversion, the point at which someone comes to Christ, gets saved, gets born again, however we want to put it. But Jesus focuses on the mission. He focuses on making disciples, the greater process of which conversion is a part. There is an event in it. And so he says, baptize them. And so here we see evangelism coming in, the point at which a person comes to Christ, comes to faith. It's a point in the process of discipleship. I think discipleship is something that happens before conversion. We disciple people towards conversion. We disciple them at the point of conversion. And we continue to disciple them after conversion. And we need to look at the process, not just the event. And then he says, teach them. Teaching involves passing on knowledge, understanding, and leading people to obedience. I think when we come to teaching in the church, we've so focused on transmitting information rather than transferring information. The Hebrew mind transferred information. In the Hebrew mind, a teacher is not taught until a student has learned. Today, we focus on transmitting information. And so the teacher is taught when the information has been spoken or the information has been given, with very little regard to the student or the disciple, the one that's receiving. And so there's an overemphasis on my ministry, what I have to give, rather than the biblical issue of holistic discipleship, leading a person to a point of understanding and obedience. And so Jesus includes all of this in one sentence. He says, go. He talks about the mission. He says, baptize them. And he talks about teaching them, discipleship. All in one sentence. It's integrated. It's an integrated whole. And then, of course, the context is missional. The context is out there. He doesn't say, go and make disciples of the church. He says, go and make disciples of nations. And so the entire context of discipleship is discipling nations, discipling people in the world that do not know Christ. And so we talk about missional discipleship as opposed to church discipleship. We talk about discipling nations as opposed to only discipling individuals. In history, when people have taken this seriously, when they've taken discipling nations seriously, we've seen nations transformed. We've seen entire countries that have turned to Christ. And this is our vision and our mission in Kingdom People. It's to see nations turn to Christ. It begins with individuals. It goes to families. We need to teach families how to disciple one another. It goes to communities, entire communities turning to Christ. It widens to cities. And it should impact nations. And so in the FEET training, we look at all of these things. And we focus on this, and we look at how every single person can be involved. Not just a select few missionaries, but you and me, the average person, how every one of us can be involved in national transformation through missional discipleship.